Okay, and we're live. Welcome back to the Polar Podcast. Joined here today, host Lex, co-host Aiden.
Hi, my name is Aiden Pierce. My brother came home early today, so I got to drive over by myself.
And we got Camden,
Hello, my name is Camden.
and a very special guest joining us for today's episode, Kaydance Redwine.
Hi, I'm Kaydance Redwine. I'm just a human here, trying to do my best.
I like that, and we really appreciate you being on the show. Thank you for coming out. So, want to get started, kind of just talk about you, specifically about yourself, because I remember you moved here freshman year, right?
Yes.
And you moved from Tennessee?
Yes.
And didn't you go there over the summer or something?
Yes. I've gone there periodically throughout the years. I went there this winter and another summer, just random times.
Nice, yeah, because I remember you in class in English, and you were in Tennessee, right?
Yes.
I remember that correctly. Very cool. What's for you in Tennessee? Is your family there?
So growing up, we kind of created our own family, and it's just our friends, but we call them family, and so that's who we go back and see.
That's awesome.
The other people there are not so good.
Oh, in
The
Tennessee?
land, boring.
Wow, very cool. I think if I looked at a map right now, I actually probably couldn't point to what state is Tennessee. I'm blanking. It's like over there in the south, right? What's it by?
Georgia, Kentucky. Do you know
Cool.
where Kentucky is?
Kinda. That's where James and Annie are from.
Yeah, it's right underneath Kentucky.
Maybe I should check out some more maps because I don't really
Yes.
know. If they were all unnamed, I wouldn't be able to find it. Very cool. So, want to talk a little bit about your activism. What started it? Were you raised in an activist family? You were always trying to work out social issues, or was it just a turning point? You saw something happen, and you're like, I need to do something.
So I think my first march, my first moment of activism, was when I was in middle school. You know the women's marches? It was the first women's march that happened. And coming from a very inclusive family, I wanted to go. And so I went to that. But that was kind of just, how would I describe it? Like a once a year thing. I didn't really continue my activism into my everyday life. But then I moved here to Oregon, and Oregon is definitely more liberal than Tennessee, but I started meeting like-minded people and figuring out what I could do. So that's kind of how it started.
What was it like in Tennessee to be an activist? Were you seen with oh, she's different from the rest of us, she's strange?
Definitely. It was also not as safe, just because your opinions are they mean a lot about who you are in the South. And so if I were to go out and protest, kind of how I do the school strike here, if I were to do that in Tennessee, I would probably get hurt.
Oh.
So this past month, or no, I don't know what time is, but a couple months ago, I was protesting in Tennessee, and I had to make my sign very lovey, I guess. Not very bold. So
Got it.
Yeah.
Do people in Tennessee drink kombucha?
No, just me.
I tried kombucha one time. I got GT Dave's original. Oh man, it was tough to finish that drink. I had a hard time.
This is Simple Truth Organic Strawberry Lemonade. It's good.
Oh,
Not GT Dave.
You ever had kombucha, Aiden?
I think I've had it twice. The first time I remember, I think it was kombucha. It might have been something different, but I was handed it, and it was really good. And I was like, oh, this isn't bad. And the second time was a different story. Yeah, I did not have a good time.
Yeah, I only had it once, and it was the original unflavored. Tasted like vinegar, and it was not a good feeling.
Yeah, I haven't had any before. I think I've smelled the original before, though, and it smelled weird.
Maybe that's what we'll do in the next podcast. Go get bottles of kombucha and just chug them.
Kombucha taste test.
Oh, that would be... Well, there are probably some good ones, but do you know who GT Dave is, the creator of kombucha? Or like he brought it to America, he didn't really create it.
I know his brand and I like his brand, but I don't know him personally.
Well, yeah, neither do we. But Cody Ko and Noah Miller, they made a funny video looking at him, and he's an interesting fella. He's funny. Maybe you should watch it sometime. Cool. Let's get back to climate change. So what do you do like recurring now? So not like you do the every week, right? Do you still do that?
I try to do it, but the older I get, like as a junior in high school, it's a lot harder to find time.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm working now, so if I'm working, I can't not be working. But I've been trying, like me and the other people in the group have been trying to recruit younger kids,
Yeah.
and it's definitely been working. Like we have a pretty big.
Awesome. Is that the like Climate Coasties group? Is that what
Yeah.
you're talking about?
Yeah.
So who's like who does that group include?
It fluctuates every week. Like it's
Mhm.
kind of anybody who wants to join. So if you guys wanted to come next week, you could be a part of it for that week. Maya Stout and Haley Fueling and I run the Instagram,
Mm-hmm.
but that's not like we don't have like an official title or anything.
Gael, he comes a couple
yeah,
times.
Gael comes a lot.
Oh,
He's
classic Gael.
yeah,
Love that guy.
he's great.
Guy's a cool guy. So, you guys, like don't come to school every Friday, and then you stand in front of the, what's the town
Town
hall?
hall, I
Town
think.
hall?
City Hall.
City Hall.
City Hall, yeah.
And then just kind of bring attention to the cause.
Yeah.
Do you do, because I know you personally, you've gone to like protests up in Portland, and you've talked to like, I don't know if it's senators or representatives or whatever. What is it?
Representatives and one or like a couple senators.
Cool. Do you guys do that kind of stuff too, or does it mainly stick to?
So, I think we've been veering towards like talking to people, like important people, and actually trying to implement change rather than just like share our opinion, because there is a balance between striking and showing like what needs to be done with actually doing what needs to be done.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think right now the strike has kind of faded for a couple of us just because we've been focusing on other things like what needs to be done.
That's awesome though. Very cool. Yeah, that's one of the things that I would say is I'm hesitant to be more like active and into protesting, because that's just not really my style of like doing things. It's kind of hard for me to like I don't know, put myself out there and ask somebody else to change something, because you kind of get in a place where you have to depend on somebody else to fix it rather than fixing it yourself. So it's awesome that you're getting into more of that stuff, doing really direct stuff. That's really cool. This is probably going to be a tougher question, and you might have to think about it for a little bit, but what would you say the state of like feelings towards climate change, where it needs to be, and how it's going to get there? What do you see for like the next 10 years regarding climate change?
So I think as a group mindset, we're to the point where everybody understands that climate change is just a thing. Like nobody has to debate it anymore. I definitely don't think to like reach the carbon emissions level that we need, I don't think it's going to happen unless something drastic happens within policy.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's a lot of potential, but if we continue on this same page that we are on now, I don't think it'll turn out so good.
I see. Very cool. Do you look to anybody specifically kind of as like a role model for this stuff? Like Greta Thunberg? I heard
Yeah.
she just turned 18, right?
I definitely do look to her, but I also look to AOC.
Oh, classic.
She's
yeah.
very inspiring.
She's she had a documentary on Netflix. I watched it. She's a really cool person, I'm not going to lie. I haven't looked into her actual like policy that much, but her as her character I think is good. Very cool. Y'all like AOC?
She played Among Us. That was pretty cool.
She did play Among Us.
With Corpse.
Oh my gosh, that was funny.
Oh, I remember. I know because of that now. I didn't know who that was, but
No.
now I
Oh,
remember
see?
now.
Yeah.
Because of The Among Us.
You play Among Us, Kaydance?
Not currently, but I did.
Oh, that was funny. Oh man, can you, when you hang out with Jessa again, can you tell her to play Among Us with us?
Okay.
We used to play Among Us in English with Jessa, and it was the funniest thing ever. Just
Yeah.
a bunch of dudes and Jessa. It was really fun. But yeah, AOC was, she's a streamer now. She's a gamer. Like that. That's pretty cool. Play with
She's
Corpse.
pretty cool.
She's cool.
Very cool. Climate change. You think some policies need to be changed? Are you on a what do you think the difference is between like a national scale, just looking at America, and like global scale? What do you think needs to change in both?
Oh, I'm definitely not qualified to answer that because a lot needs to change in both. I don't like no country is particularly environmentally friendly.
Mhm.
Like no matter what that commercials or ads say, like we're still creating a lot of waste and putting out a lot of waste.
Mhm.
So I don't quite know, other than for people in power to make like incredible change, but that also doesn't seem very realistic.
Mhm.
So not to be like sad or anything, but it's kind of like a dooming thought because
Yeah.
you do rely on other people to make that change.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Unless we can somehow hold out and then all grow up and be politicians and
Counting on Kale.
yeah.
He's the only guy I've ever met that's like, yeah, when I grow up, I want to be a politician. That's
and is living it.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's pretty impressive. It's very cool though for him. So you said the change needs to come policy wise. Do you think one policy is kind of better than the other? There's like the carbon tax. You know, you just tax people that have carbon. Straight up, the government could just not let people use like or put out a bunch of carbon emissions. What do you think is the best policy wise?
I definitely think, just like with children, if you take something away and don't replace it with anything, people are going to be mad.
Mm-hmm.
So the carbon tax is a great idea because it mostly targets big companies.
Mm-hmm.
But just that in general probably won't do much. It'll do a lot, but we need more than that. I don't think strictly saying you can't drive cars, you can't do all this is realistic and would ever happen. But I think we're slowly being provided more alternatives. And then also, to get to these places, there is something that will be going on soon, but like local communities putting their government on trial so that they can say, hey, you haven't done anything for the climate crisis. You need to change that, and here's what we want you to do.
Very cool. That's a good answer, because I think a common fear for people that are like resistant to climate change, like fixing it, is afraid that the government's just gonna stop everything and take it all away all at once.
Yeah.
So that's good to hear for someone that's on the activism, is that that's not actually the case.
Yeah, I don't think that would ever happen. It just doesn't make sense politically.
Yes. Very cool. So what's the total scope of all activism you do? So like climate change, and then what else? What issues you'd say you're part of?
I also think it's really funny because you guys see me as an activist. I just see myself as somebody who notices like some things are wrong that need to be changed, and then I just try to do my little part to change them. And so in the past I've gone to women's marches, and then they haven't, like COVID happened, and so a lot of things have been put on hold. I've gone to Black Lives Matter protests, climate change protests, like just, and all of the ones in between.
Okay.
But
So-
I wouldn't like, I wouldn't say I'm like an avid protester.
Yeah. So if you don't call yourself an activist, what do you call yourself? Or no title? You're just a girl doing her thing, trying to make the world a better place one day at a time.
Yeah,
Got it.
exactly.
Very cool. What was that like over the summer? Because I mean, I heard some pretty intense stuff went down in Portland, and you were up there a couple times, right? What was that?
Yeah, I was up there in the heat of it. You saw what it was like on the news.
Mhm.
There were like police officers, National Guard, like stationed behind fences, but then also chasing down protesters, kidnapping protesters, like tear gassing them just for protesting.
Mm-hmm.
And looking back on it, at the time I was just angry. I was like, why are they doing this? And then that just fueled me to want to do it more. But now looking back on it, I was like, wow, we were just implementing our rights as Americans and we were getting harmed for it. So it's like mind-boggling, but
Yeah.
it was definitely very intense. I got tear gassed a lot. There was one moment where story time. One moment it was me, Maya Stout, and some other older kid, and then two friends from Tennessee. We were all up there, and we were trying to run away from the police. And
Why were they chasing you? Just because you're a protester?
Yeah, because we were protesting, and they were chasing everybody. And we were stuck, and so we had to make a turn onto a block, and that block was solid white with tear gas.
Ooh.
And we had to run through it. And
Oh.
so we run through it, and it's like a movie scene, like in an action movie where you're
Yeah.
running, and then you're like, I can't go on, and you fall to your knees, and you think you're gonna die. So that happened, but then we heard voices. They're like, come on, you can make it. And so we made it,
Wow.
and they poured milk on our eyes, the whole thing.
Man, is that like how painful is it on a scale like 0 to 10?
I actually thought I was dying.
Oh my gosh, that's terrible.
But pain-wise, it's like not super painful, but it does feel like you're dying.
Is it like pepper spray where it burns everything, or is it a different kind of pain, or what?
It's like pepper spray, but way more intense and just overwhelming. So I went through like a solid wall of it. So
Uh-huh.
it was like all over my skin, in my lungs, like
Oh man, that sounds
in
terrible.
my eyes.
That sounds absolutely terrible. Wow. So how long does it last? You pour milk on your eyes, and then what? You're blind for another 5 minutes?
Well, yeah, it's probably intense for about 10 minutes. And then after that, you kind of feel hungover from all of it. 'Cause it's like, wow, I almost died.
Yeah, that's intense. Quite impressive. I mean, I would probably cry like a little baby if I ran through all that. I would be time to go home. I don't need all that in my eyes. Oh, wow, very cool though. So how many times did you go up there?
Oh, I would try to go every week with different people, once a week. So you know how there was this moment where everybody was like, yeah, I'm an activist for Black Lives Matter, and then it faded really quickly.
Yeah.
I kept going up there, but then the protests got smaller and smaller, and then there were no longer people protesting. It was mostly just like homeless people and like drug addicts like hanging out in the park, like just having a place to sleep with free food. And I was like, I mean, you do you, but this is no longer doing anything productive anymore. And so that's when I stopped going. But I think now, after COVID, it's not, COVID's still going on. I don't mean to say after COVID.
Right, it's nearing the end.
Yeah, but right now I think more people are starting up protests. So I think I'll go up soon.
Awesome. So it seems, depending on where your news get your news from, either one news source is going to seem that the rioting was really extreme. It was only riots and breaking windows and burning everything. And then other news is going to be like, it wasn't really a thing. That was a very small scale. What would you, being there, say like it was?
So there was also a wave of looting. Like everyone was just like, okay, it was not. So there was like different groups of people at these protests. There was the police officers, the homeless people, and then the people who just wanted to cause trouble, who just came there for the clout, who just came there for to steal stuff, to break stuff. And so towards the beginning there were a lot more like looters and people who just wanted to vandalize because they had an excuse. And one story, here's an example. So story time. It was late at night and people wanted, like, we were all just doing something. We were standing there and this white guy starts a fire just in their street, like a bonfire, but in the middle of the road. And then this guy comes over and he's like, as a black man, please put this fire out. We don't need to cause more trouble. Yeah. And I think that's just a really good example of, like, people are there to protest and fight, like, literally to not be killed, and then other people are just like, oh, we're gonna have a good time and vandalize things.
Yeah, that was pretty wild from an outsider's perspective to kind of see that. Like, I've seen a couple clips where, like, it's the one person walking through a crowd who wants to make trouble and everybody else just there to protest. Yeah. And the guy yells, flip over the car.
Oh, I've seen that.
And then everybody that's just there to protest, like, all gang up on him. And he's like, stop, dude. We're not doing that. We're just protesting. We do not need that kind of, like, reputation. So. Yep.
Yeah. I think towards the beginning, sorry, I totally didn't answer the question all the way. In the beginning, there was a lot more violence, just because there were more of those troublesome people. But then also COVID started progressing and more businesses started getting shut down. So not only were there a few buildings vandalized, but then a lot of buildings started going out of business. So it looked like there was way more destruction than there actually was, in Portland specifically.
That makes sense. So there have been a couple periods of times where Black Lives Matter becomes really, really active. Would you say that this time was significantly different from all the other times? And, like, how much change did this movement accomplish for, like, this starting in, like, June to now?
So I definitely think for our generation it brought awareness, but not any action. Because I know I'm guilty of this sometimes. And this is why I don't like to hold myself to the label of a Black Lives Matter activist, because on the day-to-day we are constantly, as white people, like, perpetuating white supremacy. And if you don't work on that constantly, then you're being counterproductive to the movement. And I definitely try to work on it, but it's not like you should be working on your white supremacy as often as you breathe, basically, because it's constant. You can't escape it. So with that, I don't think people are doing enough, and so myself included. And I just how am I going to say this? How has that changed? I think there are waves of times when people think, like, when people get these bouts of productivity. And so I think there was one when we were younger, and that kind of brought awareness to our parents. And then now there's one now, and we just get to choose what we do with that. We can choose to continue to work on ourselves, or we can just ignore it and be like, oh yeah, things are better.
So what areas of life would you say that, like, white supremacy is pushed on the most, and, like, how should it be corrected? Like, how you said you try to, like, fix it internally, and what have you done?
So definitely in our education system, like, we just get this one side of history, or just we only get to hear about the white scientists who invented all of our things. And I just think that's kind of, like, obviously like, we all know this, but we just don't. So, like, breaking that would be to go out and read who actually invented it, or the women or the people of color that invented it, and then who took credit for it. So that's like in school, but then your everyday thing is to like buy from black businesses, buy from people of color businesses. Definitely read a bunch of books on how to make yourself a better white person.
Got it. I want to ask you about this buying from black business thing, because I've seen it a couple times. I'd say it wasn't as prevalent as other things like the policing issue.
Mm-hmm.
That was probably the main thing that was pushed this summer. But buy from black-owned businesses has also been a smaller scale thing. What do you think about that?
I think that's genius, because obviously put your money where your mouth is, but then it's like there's a bunch of apps and online websites where it's like a list of online black businesses, but then it's like you use Amazon every day. So what's the difference? And it's like you want to put your money to people who you support and want to like not put your money towards like a big corporation who's not doing a good job and using ethical things. So I think it's a genius idea. I mean, it kind of seems obvious, but it's like if your friend makes something that's also made at the grocery store, like you're gonna be like, yo,
Buy for your friends.
Buy
Why
from
people
your
go to
friend.
the farmer's market.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff. Yeah, because Louis joining to come to the party. Wow. But yeah, when I first heard that, I think a common initial reaction is like unsettling. It seems kind of strange at first to choose where you buy something off of someone's race specifically. That feels like the opposite of what the whole equality like movement stands for. Is why should I judge where I buy stuff from off of somebody's race rather than the quality of their products? But as you get a greater understanding of it, that might change.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I really don't know for that specifically what's the best way to go about it. Louis, yeah, I mean Louis. I think Louis is an official co-host at this point. Louis just hangs. I don't even know what kind of animal this is. A sloth. There you go, Louis. It's like as big as his whole head. Nobody can even see it. It's okay. Very cool. I don't know. Oh, I had another question. You were talking about history and how we only get one side. And I had this question before. Did you have Michelle or Mr. Ryan last year? Michelle. So, Mr. Ryan, we've been learning a lot about socialism and communism and kind of left-leaning policy. Would you say that that's changed your perspective towards like social issues being in his class this year?
Oh, absolutely. Like I knew about communism and I read the Communist Manifesto, but then I never knew any examples of like of history and like the terrible repercussions that it has. And so it's definitely changed my perspective on just politics in general. I think every day I'm growing as a person and my mindset is growing towards both people and politics.
Awesome. Yeah, I definitely say it's changed how I think about things too.
Yeah.
And I always think that the best policy for making decisions, whether political or really anything else, is to just take in as much information as you possibly can about everything.
Agreed.
And then make your decision. So it's probably, you guys agree with that? Would you guys say that this U.S. history has kind of, or we're taking IB history, Asia, has changed your perspective towards politics?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know anything besides like democracy, so I learned a lot about communism and other types. I mean, it was interesting, I guess. I don't know necessarily if it changed me that much, but it was definitely a lot more interesting to learn in that class. Like, I'm a lot more focused.
Yeah, I'd say it's definitely different. Would you agree?
Yeah. yeah, like I knew about communism. I knew it wasn't good, but like I didn't know anything specific about it. And kind of learning about that kind of shows it's interesting. I would agree with that.
Yeah, I think it's common. The average person kind of has a base definition of what communism is, and it's not super specific. And it's good for people to learn examples and how it played out and what it really means, because it's kind of vague. Very cool. I had more questions, but I forgot. Louis, get the toy, dude. He's just hanging. Cool. Do we have anything else we need to talk to you about? Do you have any more story times you want to tell us or anything?
No.
Any crazy examples?
I mean, I have lots of stories. But
What's your next plan for the few next years in regards to like protesting or changing the world, you know?
So I definitely want to go to college and expand my horizons, make more connections with people that will get me to a place where I can have influence on a wider scale. But I definitely think there is something in making small impacts on people and making impacts on the people you know, because we can change the world in a big way, but we can change the world even more by changing who we know. And I think that's kind of like my biggest shift in mindset recently. I used to say, oh, go big or go home, but it's like we gotta go home before we can go big.
Yeah.
And I think for me, I'm going to possibly be a lawyer, possibly be a scientist or a politician. You know, the horizons are wide.
Yeah. I always tell people, just do as much as you possibly can.
Exactly.
Keep all the doors open that you can, and then
Exactly.
just take it as far as you're able to. Very cool. I think that's all we've pretty much got to go over. Anything you want to say to the audience or anything?
Have a good day. Do
Cool.
something good for yourself or for others.
Awesome. Thank you for being on the show. Thank you for everybody that's listening. And I think that's a wrap today. We're going to make another episode, just us three, so if you want to go check that out. And that's that. Bye.
See ya.
That's a wrap.